Hi, everyone. Thanks for signing in. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes to give people time to log in, and then we'll get going. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. My name is Maggie Downing. I'm the manager of digital imaging at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. Today's webinar on metadata for digitization is 4th in a series of our 6 short and focused webinars on topics related to digitization. So welcome back if you've been watching. This webinar and all of the webinars in this series are being recorded and will be available on YouTube. And a link will be sent to all registrants once it's been posted. With the link, I'll also include the resources that I list in these slides and any other resources that I feel may help answer some of the questions that come up. I will answer a few questions at the end. You're also welcome to email me with any follow-up questions that you have. So the images in today's slides are from a couple of herbarium collections online, as well as from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So today we're going to talk about metadata, which can maybe seem like kind of an abstract concept and a little bit overwhelming. But today I hope that I can break the concept down a little bit to make it seem more manageable, and then provide some resources for further learning. In this webinar, I'll discuss the definition and importance of metadata and controlled vocabularies, how to create internal procedures for metadata creation, how to associate metadata with your files, and then briefly discuss some tips on selecting a collection management system to help you manage your metadata. So first, I'll start with the definition. Metadata, as defined by the National Information Standards Organization, is structured information that describes, explains, locates, or otherwise makes it easier to retrieve, use, or manage an information resource. So that's kind of a mouthful. So just to break that down a little bit further, metadata is information that you record about an object or a record. So the herbarium specimen on this slide shows an example of metadata. So we have the actual plant, which would be the information resource. And then we also have information about its name, where it was found, when it was collected, and its catalog number within the museum. All of this contextual information is metadata. The description helps to describe the plant so that it's useful to researchers, and the catalog number helps to locate, retrieve, and manage the specimen within the institution. So different types of metadata, there are different types of metadata for digital files that serve different purposes. And they include descriptive, administrative, technical, structural, and preservation metadata. So some metadata is the same kind that you may already be creating for physical materials through object records, mark records, and finding aids, for example. Descriptive metadata describes an item and includes information like the title, the date, and the subject, for example. Administrative metadata helps you to manage an item and can include information like copyright and access restrictions. And some metadata is just used for digital files. So technical metadata can include the scanner or the camera used to create the file, the date the file was created, and the pixel dimensions, for example. Technical metadata is usually created automatically and embedded right into your files. Structural metadata records how a digital file relates to other files, such as whether a file represents one page from a book. And preservation metadata is information used in digital preservation and can include information like checksums, a history of data corruption or recovery, information on when files were transferred, and virus scans. Metadata is important to collections, and especially to digitized collections, in that it supports the discovery of the resources through the ability to search electronically. This can provide some valuable insights into your collections. So while your physical collection may be organized in one way, such as by type and size of material, you can sort metadata in many ways. So for example, you could search to see all of the works that are created in 1909. You could see all works that depict flowers, like I did in prep for this webinar. Metadata can also help facilitate the sharing of resources across multiple institutions, which can allow for new relationships among materials to be discovered and shared. Metadata helps you maintain control over access and restrictions if needed. So for example, you could filter out items that are in copyright and choose to make them unavailable on your public-facing website, but may be available on site to researchers to the institution. And lastly, preservation metadata will help you maintain the digital records well into the future. So for different types of metadata and for different types of collections, there are a variety of metadata standards or schema. These standards help to ensure that metadata is applied consistently within an institution and across institutions, which will help make all the work you put into creating it more useful. One example of a metadata schema is Dublin Core, which some of you may already be familiar with. Dublin Core is a descriptive schema, and that includes a set of elements such as title, date, creator, etc. Dublin Core elements are broad and generic enough to describe a wide range of materials and resources, and are common in describing web content. Other examples of metadata include machine-readable encoding, or MARC, which is widely used in libraries, and encoded archival description, or EAD, which is common in archives as a means of creating finding aids. So this is a very quick explanation here, but the University of Texas Libraries has a good resource on the basics of metadata, and these go a little more in depth into describing and breaking down different metadata schemas. We have a link there, and that will be put into the chat for everyone too. So these different metadata schemas are supported by controlled vocabularies. And controlled vocabularies are standardized and organized arrangements of words and phrases that are created to provide a consistent way to describe data. So using controlled vocabularies in your metadata creation will help to improve information retrieval. Some examples of controlled vocabularies include the Library of Congress name authority file, the Library of Congress subject headings, the Getty Union list of artist names, and the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus, to name just a few. So just for one example, I have an image here by the photographer Edward Muybridge, who changed his name a lot and went by different aliases over the course of his lifetime. So if I was creating a descriptive metadata for this photograph, I might consult the Getty Union list of artist names to get the preferred version of his name. And here, the one in bold is the preferred version, and you can see that's what the Metropolitan Museum of Art uses in their captions. So I've talked a little bit about the different types of metadata and controlled vocabularies that can help guide metadata creation at your institution. So while these standards are useful, it's likely that your collections will have some distinct needs, and I recommend creating internal policies and procedures. So maybe you want to start looking at Dublin Core, but there are some elements that you have no need for, such as language if you have a fine art collection. And maybe there are some elements that you want to add, such as a tribal affiliation if you manage indigenous materials. A document that outlines all of these decisions is called a data dictionary. And data dictionaries document different metadata element names and definitions, an obligation of whether a specific element is required or just optional to fill in, and guidance on use. When drafting a data dictionary and metadata procedures for your institution, consider what metadata you currently use, who your audience is and what terminologies they'll understand, what resources you have to create the metadata, such as what tools you may have and what skills your staff or volunteers have, or whoever will be in charge of adding the metadata. And then consider who you will share your metadata with. If you plan to submit to a content aggregator, what are their requirements? So on that note, in the first webinar in this series, I mentioned the Digital Public Library of America, or DPLA. And DPLA works with state and regional hubs that share images and metadata from contributing organizations so that everything can be accessed by researchers all in one place. Contributing to these hubs is a nice way to boost the discoverability of your content. And if you're interested in making your content available on DPLA, I recommend looking at the metadata requirements and recommendations before you begin your project. This way you're entering everything that they need at the beginning. In the example here, I have included a page, a screenshot from the data dictionary for institutions that want to contribute to NewYorkHeritage.org, which is a research portal for institutions around New York and contributes content to a DPLA. This is a very robust example of a data dictionary because it is meant to be applicable to many different types of collections. On the summary page that I have shown here, it outlines various metadata elements like title, creator, subject, and rights. It says whether or not a certain element is required or just recommended. It lists controlled vocabularies that can be consulted for each element. And then each of these elements links to its own separate page in the data dictionary that provides more details about how to use each element. Also on this slide, I've included a link to a guide for creating your own internal data dictionary by the Sustainable Heritage Network. Okay, so we've talked about what metadata is and how it's organized. So now I want to pivot and talk about different ways that metadata can be associated with your files. So you can record it in through a variety of collection management systems, such as the museum system, Embark, PastPerfect, or ContentDM, to name just a few examples. On the slide here, I have a screenshot of the CMS Embark. You can see there are lots of different types of metadata that can be entered into the CMS, including basic description information, loan information, access restrictions, and keywords. This information can also be recorded into an Excel or Access document for smaller projects. Though for large-scale projects, I do recommend a CMS. You can also embed metadata directly into the files itself. Some metadata gets embedded automatically, such as the technical metadata, which you can see up at the top in the file properties here. And this other metadata can then be embedded within the file, either at the time of capture, using your scanning or photo processing software, or on the final files using tools such as Adobe Bridge, which is what I've included in the screenshot here. So in this example in Bridge, you can see the metadata that's already associated with these files, and then all the different fields I can add text into. And then this would then be embedded into the file info of the digital file. So metadata does not have to be embedded into the file as long as the metadata is kept in a database and corresponds with the file name or folder name of the digital files. So as long as your file name corresponds to an object record in some sort of database, you'll be in good shape. But embedded metadata does add another layer of security to help ensure that the image file is not separated from its context. So in the second webinar in this series, I introduced the importance of a collection management system, and I've mentioned that again here today. I do want to say a few words on selecting a CMS, since these systems are so important for maintaining metadata and collection information. So there are lots of options on the market that vary in cost, functionality, and level of required staff expertise. Some important things to consider when you're comparing options are whether you prefer an open source or proprietary software, whether you want to host your digital files locally or online, the cost and ease of use, how easy it is to integrate with your current data management system, and how easy it is to import and export metadata. All of these considerations can help start to narrow down your options. If you're just beginning the process of selecting a CMS, I recommend checking out this technical leaflet on choosing a collection management software produced by the American Association for State and Local History. This resource outlines the different things you should consider and also compares a few popular systems on the market. Or for an at-a-glance comparison of a lot of different options on the market, you might want to check out Ashley Bluer's Collection Management System Collection. And this is more of an informal Google sheet, but it covers a lot of options offered by different collection management systems. And there, those links are up in the chat as well. So we've talked today about the importance of metadata, different types of standards and controlled vocabulary, how to associate metadata with digital files, and how to create internal procedures. As with all of my presentations so far, I want to wrap up by encouraging everyone to document all of your decisions regarding digitization and metadata procedures. And this information can be recorded in a data dictionary and incorporated into your digitization plan. I am including a couple more resources here. The first is a link to the Sustainable Heritage Network resources page. I mentioned them a few times in this series, and they have a lot of good resources that break down the concepts related to metadata in an easy to understand way. And their guides are aimed at smaller institutions that may have limited resources. Also included here is an more in-depth introduction to understanding metadata, published by the National Information Standards Organization. So we just have 2 more webinars in this series. Next week, I'll discuss quality control and how to determine whether to do your digitization in-house or to outsource it. And then on July 28th, I'll discuss equipment selection, and I'll also discuss some software selection considerations as well. And those last links should be coming up in the chat in just a moment. But I do want to just give my email address here, and I have a couple of minutes for questions. But if I don't get to yours, I will try also to follow up via email. Thanks, everyone. I do have a question here. Can you talk about checksums and how to use them? I talked about those more in depth in a previous webinar, Bernadette, and I can send you a link to that one. Yeah, I can send the checksum video to the group. And some of the names, and I would recommend checking out these resources here, but some of the ones that I have come encountered with is the museum system, Embark, Past Perfect, and Content DM. But these links here will give you a nice rundown of a lot of different options on the market. And all these webinars will be put on YouTube just a couple days after they're recorded. So they'll all be in the series on YouTube. I have a specific question about TMS from Keith. I'm not quite sure, but I'll follow up with you via email if that's okay. And yeah, we'll send out links to the previous webinars with this one. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.